The eastern maintenance access was exactly where Sergeant Hallex had said it would be, a narrow hatch in the floor of an abandoned storage room, overlooked by the Kethrani because it was too small for armored soldiers to use effectively for a group of desperate students. It was perfect. Una dropped down first, her feet hitting the metal grating of yet another service tunnel. This one was different from the others. It ran directly beneath the station's central atrium, the large open space that connected all the major sections of Concordia Prime, and it ended at a maintenance ladder that led up to the command center's emergency entrance. They were close now, so close that Una could hear the sounds of the defenders above, the hum of shield generators, the occasional burst of weapons fire, the shouted orders of soldiers trying to hold their ground. But between them and safety stood one final obstacle. Una climbed the ladder until she could peer through a ventilation grate into the atrium below. What she saw made her heart sink. The atrium was occupied by a full Kethrani squad, just as Hallex had warned 12 soldiers in dark armor, their weapons trained on the doors leading to the command center. They had set up a defensive position around the only clear path to the defenders. Anyone who tried to cross that open space would be cut down in seconds. "We cannot fight them," Loreth whispered, his sensitive eyes picking out details that Una could barely see. "Their weapons are fully charged, and they have clear sight lines to every entrance." "Then we do not fight them," Una said. "We make them fight something else." She descended the ladder and gathered her exhausted classmates around her. Dr. Chai had grown pale from pain and blood loss, supported now by Crix on one side and a Theshan student on the other. The rest of the group was not in much better shape, scared, tired, and running on nothing but fear and hope. But they were still alive, and Una intended to keep them that way. "Here is what we are going to do," she said, keeping her voice low and steady. "We are going to create chaos in that atrium, not with weapons, because we do not have any, not with strength, because we are not soldiers. We are going to use everything that makes each of you special." She pointed at Peleth. "You can secrete that slippery substance your species produces, yes?" The Hollith nodded nervously. "I need you to coat the main floor of the atrium. Make it so slick that no one can keep their footing." She turned to the Theshans. "Your bioluminescence can be intensified, right? If you push yourselves, you can produce flashes bright enough to blind." Loreth and Brel exchanged uncertain looks but nodded. "I need you to create a distraction. Bright flashes from multiple angles. Make them think they are under attack from everywhere at once." "Dr. Chai," Una continued, "you have an emergency medical beacon on your uniform. If you activate it, what happens?" "It sends a priority signal to the command center," the doctor replied, understanding dawning in her eyes. "They will know someone needs immediate rescue. The defenders might send someone out, which will force the Kethrani to split their attention." Crick stepped forward. "And what will you do?" Una took a deep breath. "I will be the bait." "Absolutely not," Myra said immediately. "That is suicide." "No," Una replied. "It is the only option that gives everyone else the best chance." She looked at her friend with calm determination. "The Kethrani are trained soldiers. They will target the biggest threat first. I am small and I am fast, and I am very good at not getting caught when people are chasing me. I grew up practicing that skill every day of my childhood. You want to run through a room full of armed soldiers?" "Not through," Una said. "Around, along the edges, over obstacles, anywhere they are not expecting me to be." She laid out the full plan, explaining each step in detail. Peleth would slip through the ventilation system and coat the floor with her slippery secretion. The Theshans would position themselves at different angles around the atrium. Dr. Chai would activate her beacon at exactly the right moment, and when the chaos began, When the Kethrani were slipping and blinded and confused about where the real threat was coming from, the rest of the group would make a run for the command center entrance. Yuna would draw pursuit, leading any soldiers who could still move away from her classmates. This plan has too many things that could go wrong. Crix observed, every plan has things that could go wrong. Yuna replied, that is why it is called a plan and not a guarantee. But I believe in all of you. I believe we can do this together. She looked around at the faces of beings from a dozen different species. Creatures she had barely known a few hours ago. They had survived this far because they had worked together. Because they had trusted each other when trust was all they had. Now she was asking them to trust her one more time. I know I am just a human, she said quietly. I know my species has only been part of your galaxy for 30 years. But we have been surviving impossible situations for a lot longer than that. Survival is what we do. It is what we have always done. And right now, in this moment, I need you to believe that we can survive this too. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Crix stepped forward and placed one of his armored hands on Yuna's shoulder. I have spent this entire semester thinking humans were primitive and foolish. He said, I was wrong. You are the most dangerous kind of being in the universe. Someone who refuses to give up. I will follow your plan. One by one. The others added their agreement. Pelith straightened, despite her fear. Lorith's skin glowed with renewed determination. Even Dr. Chai managed a weak smile. They took their positions. The next few minutes felt like hours as everyone moved into place. Yuna crouched near the maintenance ladder, waiting for the signal. Her heart was pounding so hard she could feel it in her ears, but her mind was clear. This was the moment everything had been leading. To this, the signal came. Pelith reported the floor was ready. The Deshans confirmed their positions. Dr. Chai activated her beacon, and the atrium erupted into chaos. Bright flashes of bioluminescent light blazed from 3 different directions. The Kethrani soldiers spun, trying to identify the source of the attack. 2 of them stepped forward and immediately lost their footing on the slick floor, crashing down in a tangle of limbs and armor. An alarm blared from the command center as the defenders responded to the medical beacon. A door opened and station security forces began pushing out. Adding to the confusion, Yuna burst from cover and ran. She sprinted along the edge of the atrium, her feet finding purchase on the dry sections. Pelith had left for exactly this purpose. A Kethrani soldier spotted her and raised his weapon. But another flash of light blinded him before he could fire. She vaulted over a fallen planter, ducked under a stray shot, and kept moving behind her. She heard her classmates making their break for the command center. Crix was carrying Dr. Chai again, his powerful legs driving him forward. Myra was beside him, helping to clear a path. The Deshans followed, their flashing skin creating a strobe effect that made it almost impossible for the Kethrani to aim. 3 soldiers broke free from the confusion and chased Yuna. She had expected that she ran faster, leading them away from her friends, deeper into the atrium where more obstacles waited. The slippery floor caught one of them. Badly timed flash disoriented another. The third kept coming, faster than she had expected, closing the distance with every step. But then she heard something beautiful. The heavy clang of the command center door slamming shut behind her classmates. They had made it. Everyone had made it. The soldier behind her tackled her to the ground. And for a moment, Yuna thought it was over. But before he could raise his weapon, a plasma bolt struck him from behind. Station security forces had formed a defensive line, and they were covering her retreat. Hands grabbed her and pulled her behind the barrier, and suddenly she was safe, surrounded by defenders and rescued students and the noise of victory. The battle for Concordia Prime was not over. It would rage for another 6 hours, until Galactic Concord reinforcements arrived and drove the Kethrani fleet into retreat. But in that moment, None of that mattered. What mattered was that 25 students and one instructor had survived, because a quiet human girl had seen what others could not. When Commander Zeth finally met the group of survivors, he looked at the battered collection of young diplomats with obvious amazement. "Who led you through all of this?" he asked. Every alien in the group pointed at Yuna. She stood apart from them, exhausted and bruised, her clothes torn and her hair a mess. She did not look like a leader. She looked like a teenage girl who desperately needed sleep. But when she met the commander's eyes, he saw something there that he recognized. The unbreakable will of someone who had faced the impossible and refused to back down. "Well done," he said simply. Crix approached Yuna later, after the medics had treated her minor injuries and someone had given her a blanket and a cup of warm liquid. "I owe you an apology," he said. "I spent months treating you like you were beneath me. I was wrong." Yuna shrugged. "Humans are not better than other species," she said. "We are just well practiced at surviving when everything goes wrong. Our history is full of situations like this. Impossible odds, terrible enemies. No way out. And we survived every one of them. Not because we were the strongest or the smartest, but because we never gave up." She pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders. "That is what humans do," she said quietly. "We endure." The maintenance tunnels of Concordia Prime were never meant for travel. They were designed for repair drones and emergency access. Narrow passages filled with cables and pipes and the constant hum of the station's life. Support systems for 25 frightened students and one terrified instructor. They had become a lifeline. Yuna moved through the darkness with her hand on the wall, feeling her way forward. Ahead of her, Laura's skin glowed a soft blue, providing just enough light to see a few meters ahead. Behind her, the rest of the group followed in single file, their breathing loud in the confined space. "How much further to the main junction?" Yuna whispered. "Another 100 meters. Velthos replied from somewhere in the middle of the line. "From there we can access the service corridors that lead to the command center. If the command center is still standing." Crix added darkly. No one responded to that. The possibility that there was nothing left to escape hung over them all like a shadow. They had been moving for what felt like hours, though Yuna knew it had probably been less than 30 minutes. Time stretched strangely in the dark. Every sound made them freeze. The clang of distant pipes, the rumble of explosions from other parts of the station, the occasional burst of static from Velthas's damaged communicator. But so far they had avoided the Kethrani patrols. Yuna's strategy was working. The invaders were focused on the main corridors and populated areas. They had no reason to search the maintenance tunnels for a group of students. At least not yet. "Wait." Pelith called from ahead. Her gelatinous body had squeezed through a narrow gap to scout the path forward. There was a problem. Yuna made her way to the front of the line, carefully stepping over the exhausted forms of her classmates. When she reached Pelith, she saw what had stopped them. The tunnel ahead had collapsed. A section of ceiling had caved in, probably from the explosions that had rocked the station during the initial attack. Rubble blocked the passage completely. "Can you fit through?" Yuna asked the Holoth. "Maybe," Pelith said uncertainly, "but I do not know what is on the other side. It could be more collapse. It could be Kethrani." Yuna studied the rubble pile, looking for any gap large enough to squeeze. There was nothing. Even Pelith would have trouble navigating that mess of twisted metal and broken concrete. "We need another route," she said. "Instructor Velthos, are there any other paths to the command center?" The Deshan consulted his mental map of the station, his forearms gesturing as he traced imaginary corridors. "There is one alternative," he said slowly, "but it requires us to cross the medical wing." "The medical wing is on Deck 9, Crix said. "That is where the heaviest fighting was reported. We would be walking into a war zone. Do we have a choice?" Mira asked. The group fell silent. They were trapped between a collapsed tunnel and a battlefield. With Kithrani soldiers hunting through the station and rescue still hours away if it came at all, Yuna felt the weight of their fear pressing down on her. These beings had trusted her, followed her into the dark because she had spoken with confidence when everyone else was paralyzed. Now she had to justify that trust. The medical wing it is, she said finally, but we do not go through the main corridors. We stay in the maintenance tunnels as long as possible, then move fast and quiet through the wing itself. The Kithrani will have already cleared it if the fighting is over. They will not expect anyone to go back. That is a large assumption, Crick said. Yes. Yuna agreed, but it is the best assumption we have. She did not wait for further argument, turning back the way they came. She led the group toward a junction they had passed earlier, one that would take them on a longer route to the medical wing. The tunnels grew warmer as they descended, the environmental systems struggling to compensate for the damage the station had sustained. Sweat dripped down Yuna's back, but she did not slow down. They reached the access point for the medical wing 20 minutes later. Yuna pressed her ear against the sealed hatch, listening for any sound from the other side. Nothing. Either the fighting had moved on, or everyone in the medical wing was dead. Neither option was comforting. Lorith. Dim your light, she whispered. Everyone stay close and stay quiet. We move on my signal. She opened the hatch slowly, wincing at the slight creak of metal beyond it. The medical wing stretched out in emergency darkness, lit only by the same red strips that had illuminated their classroom. The walls were scorched in places, marked by the distinctive burns of plasma weapons, but there were no bodies, no Kithrani, no one at all. They've already been through here, Myra observed quietly, cleared it, and moved on. Just like you said. Yuna nodded, but did not relax. Empty did not mean safe. She led the group through the abandoned medical wing, past overturned beds and shattered equipment. Glass crunched under their feet despite their best efforts to move silently every corner they turned. Yuna expected to find Kithrani soldiers waiting, but the wing was truly empty until they reached the surgical bay. Yuna heard the sound before she saw anything. A weak tapping, rhythmic and desperate, coming from behind an overturned cabinet. She held up her hand, signaling the group to stop. Then she crept forward, her heart pounding, and peered around the edge of the cabinet. A woman lay trapped beneath a fallen support beam, her leg pinned at a painful angle. She was human, middle-aged, wearing the uniform of a Concordia Prime medical officer. Her name tag read, Dr. Su Jin Chai. Please, the woman whispered, her eyes widening when she saw Yuna's face. Please, help me. Yuna's first instinct was to rush forward, but she forced herself to think helping this woman would take time. It would make noise. It would put everyone at risk. Crix appeared at her shoulder, his compound eyes taking in the scene. We cannot stop, he said, his voice low. She is too injured to travel quickly. If we try to help her, we will all be caught. We cannot leave her. Myra hissed back. She is human. She is a stranger who will slow us down. Crix replied. This is not personal. It is practical. She is a person, Yuna said firmly, and we are not leaving her. She moved forward before anyone could argue, kneeling beside the injured doctor. How long have you been here? Since the attack started, Dr. Chai gasped. I was treating a patient when the ceiling came down. The Kithrani came through, but they thought I was dead. I have been playing dead ever since. Smart. Yuna said. She examined the beam pinning the doctor's leg. It was heavy, but not immovable, with enough hands. They could lift it. Crix, I need your strength, she said. And yours, she added, pointing to a Theshan student named Bro, who had barely spoken since the attack began. Pelith, once we lift the beam, you need to pull her free. This is a mistake, Crix said. But he moved into position anyway. 1, 2, 3. Yuna counted. And they lifted. The beam rose just enough for Paleth to slide Dr. Chai out from underneath. The doctor cried out in pain, but Yuna clamped a hand over her mouth, silencing her. "I know it hurts," Yuna whispered, "but you need to be quiet." The Kathrani could still be close, Dr. Chai nodded, tears streaming down her face. Myra was already wrapping the injured leg with bandages from a nearby medical kit. "She cannot walk on this," Mira reported. "The bone is broken. Then we carry her." Yuna said. She looked at her exhausted classmates, at the fear and doubt in their eyes. "I know you are all tired. I know this was not what any of you expected. But we are not the kind of people who leave others behind. We are not the Kathrani." For a long moment, no one moved. Then Crick stepped forward and helped lift Dr. Chai onto his back, his exoskeleton bearing her weight easily. "You are the strangest human I have ever met," he said to Yuna, "and I mean that as a compliment." Yuna almost smiled. "Thank you. Now let us keep moving." With their new burden and new ally, the group continued through the medical wing. Dr. Chai, despite her pain, began whispering directions, shortcuts she knew from years of working on the station, areas to avoid, places where survivors might have gathered. She had knowledge they needed, knowledge that might save them all, and that was why you did not leave people behind. Yuna thought, not just because it was right, but because you never knew who might save you in return. Humanity had learned that lesson through countless generations of helping strangers who became friends, of building communities from nothing but shared struggle. It was the oldest lesson in the book, and it still worked. The deeper they moved into the station, the more signs of battle they encountered: scorch marks on walls, shattered viewports hastily sealed with emergency foam, and the occasional body that they hurried past without looking too closely. Dr. Chai rode on Crix's back, her injured leg wrapped tight but still causing her to wince with every step. The Verdani carried her without complaint, though Yuna noticed his movements had grown slower over the past hour. Even his tough exoskeleton had limits. They had just entered a section of service corridors near the station's lower decks when Peleth returned from scouting ahead. Her gelatinous body was trembling, a sign of extreme stress in her species. "There is someone up ahead," she whispered. "Not one of ours." Not one of ours could only mean one thing. Kathrani Yuna signaled for the group to halt and pressed herself against the wall. She crept forward until she could see around the corner, her movements slow and silent. A single Kathrani soldier sat slumped against the wall of the corridor. His armor was damaged, cracked along one side, and dark fluid seeped from beneath it. He was injured, maybe dying. His weapon lay on the ground beside him, just out of reach, and he was young. Yuna did not know how she knew that, given how alien his features were. But something about the way he held himself reminded her of frightened teenagers back on Earth. This was not a hardened warrior. This was a conscript, someone who had been thrown into a war he probably did not fully understand. She returned to the group and reported what she had seen. "One wounded enemy," she said quietly, separated from his unit. "Then we go around him," Laura suggested. "Find another path." "There is no other path," Dr. Chai said, her voice strained with pain. "That corridor is the only route to the command center from this section. Unless you want to go back through the medical wing and risk the main halls. Then we deal with him." Crick said grimly. He shifted Dr. Chai off his back and onto the arms of two Deshan students. "I will be quick." "Wait," Yuna said. "What do you mean, deal with him?" "He is an enemy combatant. He would kill all of us without hesitation if he could. We eliminate the threat and move on." Several students nodded in agreement. Even Myra looked uncertain, her usual fierce loyalty to Yuna wavering in the face of practical necessity. "He is wounded and alone." Yuna said, "He is not a threat. Not right now. Crix replied, but what happens when he recovers and alerts his comrades? We will be hunted even more aggressively. You want to kill someone who cannot fight back? The Vordani's compound eyes gleamed in the dim light. I want to survive. This is war. Human. I have not forgotten what his people are doing to this station. Yuna looked at her classmates. At the fear and exhaustion on their faces, she understood the logic of what Crix was suggesting, in a purely strategic sense. He was right. The Kethrani soldier was a risk, and eliminating that risk would be the safest option. But something inside her rebelled against that logic. My species spent thousands of years fighting wars, she said slowly. We got very good at killing each other. We invented weapons that could destroy entire cities, entire nations. And you know what we learned? No one answered. We learned that cruelty is easy. Yuna continued. Anyone can be cruel when they are scared and desperate. The hard thing is to hold on to who you are when cruelty would be convenient. She stepped forward, putting herself between Crix and the corridor. I am not going to let us become monsters just to survive. If we murder a wounded soldier who cannot fight back, we are no better than the Kethrani. And I did not bring everyone this far just to lose our souls in the process. Crix stared at her for a long moment. Then he made that clicking sound again. The one that usually meant dismissal, but this time it sounded almost like respect. What do you suggest we do then, human? We help him, Yuna said. Just like we helped Dr. Chai. And then what? He kills us when he recovers. Or maybe he tells us something useful about his people's plans. Maybe he gives us information that saves our lives. That is a foolish gamble. All of survival is a gamble. Yuna replied, the question is what kind of person you want to be if you win. She did not wait for permission, turning her back on the group. She walked toward the wounded Kethrani soldier. He saw her coming and scrambled for his weapon. But his injuries made him too slow. Yuna kicked the gun away and knelt beside him, her hands raised to show she meant no harm. I am not going to hurt you, she said, hoping the universal translator would convey her tone as well as her words. The Kethrani stared at her with eyes that reminded her of a cat's. Slitted pupils, pale yellow irises. His skin was a dark gray, almost black, covered in fine scales when he spoke. His voice was rough and uncertain. You should kill me. Why? Because I would kill you if I could, but you cannot. Yuna said, so what you would do does not matter right now. What matters is what I am going to do. She reached for the medical kit Myra had been carrying and began examining his wounds. A broken section of armor had driven into his side, and the dark fluid was his blood. It was serious, but not immediately fatal. Why? He asked again. Because you are hurt and alone and scared, Yuna said as she worked, and because I know what that feels like. The Kethrani was silent for a moment. My name is Halix, he said finally. I am a sergeant in the 3rd conscription wave. I have been a soldier for 6 months. Before that I was a farmer on a world you have never heard of. I am Yuna. I have been a student at this academy for 4 months. Before that, I was just a girl from Bizan trying to figure out what to do with her life. She finished binding his wound and sat back behind her. The rest of the group had crept closer, watching the exchange with a mixture of fear and fascination. Your commanders, Yuna said. Where are they sending their forces? Halix hesitated. Why should I tell you that? Because I just saved your life, and because helping us will not hurt your people any more than they have already been hurt. This battle is over. The Galactic Concord will respond. Your fleet cannot hold this station forever. So the only question is how many more people have to die before this ends. The Kethrani sergeant looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. There is an ambush point near the command center, he said. A full squad, 12 soldiers, waiting to intercept anyone trying to reach the defenders. The approach through the western corridor is suicide. And the other approaches? There is a maintenance access on the eastern side. We were told to ignore it because it is too small for a military force to use. But your group is not military. He paused, looking at the collection of students and the injured doctor. You might make it if you're quiet enough. Yuna felt a surge of hope. Thank you. Do not thank me. Alex said, I have no loyalty to this war. I was taken from my family and given a weapon and told to fight. If your people win, maybe they will treat my world more kindly than the old masters treated us. He leaned back against the wall, exhaustion written across his alien features. Go. Before my comrades find me, and I am forced to pretend I never saw you. Yuna stood and looked at Crix. The Verdani was watching her with an expression she could not quite read. Still think this was a foolish gamble? She asked. I think you are either the wisest being I have ever met or the luckiest. Crix replied. I have not decided which. Maybe both, Myra suggested with a tired smile. The group moved on, leaving the wounded Kethrani behind. As they disappeared into the service tunnels that would take them toward the eastern maintenance access, Yuna allowed herself a moment of quiet satisfaction. Compassion was not weakness. It was strategy. It was the long game that humans had played for thousands of years. Building alliances and earning trust and finding strength in unexpected places, the Kethrani had come to conquer a station full of soft civilians who had never known war. They had not expected to find humans here, and they definitely had not expected mercy. But that was the thing about humans. Yuna thought they were always full of surprises. The red emergency lights cast strange shadows across the sealed classroom as Yuna moved between her frozen classmates. She could hear distant sounds through the walls. Footsteps that were too heavy and too rhythmic to be anything but soldiers. And occasionally, the sharp crack of weapons fire followed by screams that cut off too quickly. The Kethrani were efficient. That much was clear, instructor. Velthos had managed to establish a weak connection with Commander Zeth, the Deshan officer in charge of station security. The commander's voice came through the instructor's personal communicator in broken fragments. Multiple breaches on decks 7 through 12. Commander Zeth reported, his words cutting in and out with static. Defense forces are overwhelmed. All non-combat personnel should shelter in place and await rescue. Estimated time for reinforcements is. The connection died. Velthos tried to restore it, his forearms working frantically at the device. But the signal was gone. Shelter in place, Crix repeated, his compound eyes reflecting the dim red light. That is the logical course of action. We stay here. We stay quiet, and we wait for rescue. Several students nodded in agreement. The Hollis student, whose name Yuna had learned was Peleth, had compressed herself into a corner, trying to make her gelatinous body as small as possible. And if rescue does not come? Mira asked. She stood near Yuna, her arms crossed and her jaw set with the stubbornness that Yuna had come to know well. The Kethrani have hundreds of ships out there. How long before they take the entire station? The Galactic Concord will respond, a Deshan student named Lorith said. But his voice lacked conviction. They have to respond. The Kethrani were supposed to be dead. Another student muttered, they were supposed to be gone forever. If they could hide for 800 years, maybe the Concord is not as powerful as we thought. Fear was spreading through the room like a disease. Yuna could see it in the way they held themselves, in the trembling of hands and tentacles and appendages. These were intelligent beings from advanced civilizations. But intelligence alone did not prepare you for violence. Only experience did that. And most of these species had not experienced true violence in generations. Everyone stopped talking. Yuna said her voice was not loud, but something in its tone made the room go quiet. Even Crix, who had spent the entire semester dismissing everything she said, turned to look at her. I need to think. Yuna continued, "And I need information. Instructor Veltos, how many Kethrani soldiers are typically in a boarding squad?" The Theshan blinked his large, dark eyes. Surprised by the question, "I am not certain," he admitted. "The Kethrani were before my time, but historical records suggest they favored small, fast units, perhaps 8 to 12 soldiers per squad. And their weapons? Plasma-based, I believe, effective against organic targets, but less useful against hardened structures." Yuna nodded, filing away the information. "What about their tactics? Are they methodical or aggressive?" Velthos thought for a moment. "Methodical," he said finally. "The Kethrani were known for their patience. They would clear an area completely before moving to the next. No survivors. No resistance left behind." A chill ran through the room at those words. "No survivors. Then we cannot stay here," Yuna said. "If they are clearing deck by deck, they will reach this classroom eventually. And when they do, we will be trapped." But the commander said to shelter in place. Lorith protested. "The commander does not know our specific situation." Yuna replied, "He gave general orders for the entire station. We need to make our own decision based on what we know." "And what do you know, human?" Crix asked. His voice was sharp, but Yuna noticed that his usual arrogance had faded. He was scared. Like everyone else, he was just better at hiding it. "I know that waiting to die is not a plan," Yuna said. "I know that this room has 2 sealed exits and 1 ventilation system that leads to the maintenance tunnels. And I know that every person in this room has abilities that could help us survive if we work together." She pointed to the ventilation grate in the ceiling. "The maintenance tunnels run throughout the station. If we can get to them, we can move without being seen. The Kethrani will be focused on the main corridors where the fighting is. They will not expect resistance from a group of students. That is our advantage," Myra added, understanding where Yuna was going. "They will underestimate us." "They will underestimate you," Crix said, looking at the 2 humans. "The rest of us are from species the Kethrani actually know about." "Then let them underestimate me," Yuna said simply. "I do not need their respect. I just need them to look the other way long enough for us to escape." She began to move around the room, studying each of her classmates. "Lorith, your species can see in the dark. You will be our eyes in the tunnels. Pelith, you can fit through spaces the rest of us cannot. You will scout ahead and warn us of obstacles. Crix, your exoskeleton can withstand electrical discharge. If we need to bypass a locked door, you can handle the security panels without being hurt." One by one, she assigned roles to each student, matching their natural abilities to the tasks ahead. The fear in the room began to shift into something else. Not courage exactly, but purpose. Having something to do was better than waiting in the dark. "And what will you do?" Crix asked when she had finished. "I will keep us alive," Yuna said. "That is my job." Before anyone could respond, a sound echoed through the walls. Heavy footsteps, growing closer, and then a scream from somewhere nearby. Cut off abruptly. The Kethrani had reached their deck. "We need to move now," Yuna said. "Lorith, help me get this ventilation grate open. Everyone else, gather anything that might be useful, emergency supplies, tools, anything." The Theshan student hurried to help her, his forearms making quick work of the bolts, holding the grate in place. Meanwhile, the other students scrambled to collect supplies, medical kits, emergency rations, even some basic tools from a storage cabinet. "There are at least 3 of us who will not fit through that opening," Crix observed, looking at the narrow ventilation shaft. "The tunnels expand beyond the first section." Velthos said, "I have seen the station blueprints. The shaft is only narrow for the first few meters. Then I will go first," Pellis said, her voice still trembling but determined. "I can make sure the path is clear." Yuna felt a surge of admiration for the small Holith. She had been the most frightened of all of them. But she was willing to lead the way into darkness. That was what courage looked like. Not the absence of fear, but the choice to act anyway. Go, Yuna said. Signal us if it is safe. Pelith compressed her body and slid into the shaft. Disappearing into the darkness beyond, the footsteps outside grew louder. Yuna could hear voices now, speaking in a language that sounded like grinding metal. The universal translators struggled to process it. But she caught fragments. Clear this section, and no survivors. And the masters demand tribute. The Kethrani were almost at their door. Pelith says it is clear, Lorith reported, his sensitive Deshan hearing picking up the faint signal from ahead. Everyone move, Yuna ordered quickly and quietly. Leave nothing behind that shows we were here. One by one. The students climbed into the ventilation shaft. The larger species struggled, but managed to squeeze through. Yuna helped instructor Velthos, whose forearms made the climb awkward. Finally, only she and Myra remained. You should go. Myra said, I will cover our tracks. We go together or not at all. Yuna replied. The door to the classroom shuddered as something heavy struck it from outside. The Kethrani had arrived. Yuna and Myra scrambled into the shaft, just as the door began to buckle behind them. The classroom was empty and dark, showing no sign that 25 people had been hiding there just moments before they crawled through the darkness. Following the dim glow of Larth's bioluminescent skin ahead and behind them, Yuna heard the classroom door finally give way, followed by confused Kethrani voices wondering where their prey had gone. She allowed herself a small smile. The first lesson of survival was simple. When you cannot fight, disappear. Humanity had learned that lesson long ago. In jungles and deserts and frozen wastelands where bigger predators ruled. Now Yuna would teach it to her alien classmates, one step at a time. One breath at a time. They would survive this. She refused to accept any other outcome. Yuna Park sat in the back row of the classroom and watched her alien classmates argue about ancient wars. The Galactic Academy of Interspecies Relations floated in the empty space between 3 star systems. A massive station called Concordia Prime, where young diplomats from dozens of species learned to work together and understand each other. At least that was the official purpose. In reality, Yuna had learned that most of her classmates saw humans as children who had stumbled into a universe far too old and complicated for them to understand. Instructor Velthos stood at the front of the room, his forearms moving gracefully as he projected holographic images of a battle that had happened 10,000 years before humans even discovered fire. He was a Deshan, tall and thin with skin that glowed soft blue when he was calm and bright orange when he was upset. Right now he glowed a gentle purple, which meant he was enjoying the debate. The Meridian conflict shows us that superior numbers mean nothing against superior strategy. Crix declared from his seat near the window. Crix was a Verdani, an insectoid species with a hard black exoskeleton and compound eyes that always seemed to be judging everyone around him. He held himself with the pride of someone who believed his species had figured out the universe long before anyone else. The Deshan fleet should have retreated when they had the chance. Several students murmured in agreement. Yuna noticed that Instructor Veltos did not argue, even though the battle being discussed was part of his own species history. That was something she had learned about the Deshans. They valued learning over pride. Does anyone else have thoughts on this matter? Velthos asked, his large dark eyes scanning the room. His gaze stopped on Yuna. Perhaps our human exchange student would like to offer a perspective. 23 alien faces turned to look at her. Yuna felt her cheeks warm but kept her voice steady. The Deshans lost the battle but won the war, she said quietly. They retreated to save their fleet and came back stronger 3 cycles later. Sometimes the smartest thing you can do is survive long enough to fight again. Crix made a clicking sound that Yuna had learned was the Verdani equivalent of a dismissive laugh. A very human answer. He said, "Your species is quite good at running away and calling it strategy." Myra Tay, the only other human in the class, shot Crix an angry look. She was Yuna's closest friend at the academy, a girl from Seoul with a sharp tongue and a quick temper. But Yuna placed a hand on her arm before she could speak. "Let it go." Yuna whispered, "He is not worth the trouble." Mira frowned but stayed silent, instructor. Velthos was about to respond when the lights in the classroom flickered. A low alarm began to sound. A deep humming that Yuna felt in her chest more than heard with her ears. The purple glow of the instructor's skin shifted immediately to bright orange. "Everyone, remain calm," Velthos said, though his voice betrayed his own fear. "This is likely a drill." But it was not a drill. A NAD holographic display appeared in the center of the room, showing a view of the space outside the station. Yuna's breath caught in her throat. Ships filled the darkness, hundreds of them, arranged in attack formation around Concordia Prime. They were unlike anything she had seen in her studies, long and angular, with halls that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. "Impossible," whispered a Veshan student named Lorith. "Those are Kethrani vessels." "The Kethrani have been extinct for 800 years, Crix said. But even his proud voice wavered with uncertainty. The classroom display crackled and a voice broke through, speaking in the cold, mechanical tones of a universal translator. "This is the Kethrani Reclamation Fleet to all inhabitants of Concordia Prime. You occupy a station built on the graves of our ancestors. You have 1 standard hour to surrender or face complete annihilation. There will be no further warnings." The transmission ended. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then the first explosion rocked the station. Yuna grabbed her desk as the floor shook beneath her feet. Through the window, she saw bright flashes of light as the station's defense systems engaged the attacking fleet. But even she could tell there were too many enemy ships. "Emergency protocols," Velthos announced, his forearms working quickly at his personal console. "The classroom is now in lockdown. Blast shields will seal us from the rest of the station." Heavy metal barriers began sliding down over the windows and doors. The last thing Yuna saw before the shields closed was another explosion. Closer this time, and the distant shape of Kethrani landing craft heading toward the station's hull. "What do we do?" asked a small Holoth student, her gelatinous body trembling with fear. The Holoth were a peaceful species, evolved from ocean creatures on a world with no predators. They had never known violence until they joined the Galactic community. Nobody answered her. Yuna looked around the room and saw the same expression on every alien face: confusion, terror, and the desperate hope that someone would tell them what to do. These were students from advanced civilizations, species that had conquered disease and hunger and even death itself. But they had also evolved past the need for personal violence. Their worlds had robot armies and automated defense systems. Most of them had never thrown a punch or run from a predator or felt the cold grip of survival instinct. Yuna had grown up in a rough neighborhood in Bizin, where knowing how to read a dangerous situation could mean the difference between getting home safe and ending up in a hospital. She had studied human history, not because it was required, but because she found it fascinating. Thousands of years of conflict, survival, and adaptation. Her alien classmates saw that history as proof that humans were primitive and violent. Yuna saw it as a library of lessons written in blood. She took a deep breath and began to observe. The classroom had 2 exits, both now sealed. The ventilation system was still running, which meant the shafts might provide an alternative route. There were 24 students plus Instructor Velthos. Each species had different abilities and limitations. The Veshans could see in near total darkness. The Verdani exoskeleton could withstand significant physical trauma. The Holoth could squeeze through spaces that would stop any other species, and humans, well. Humans were adaptable. That was their gift and their curse. Another explosion shook the station. And this time, the lights went out completely. Emergency strips along the floor provided a dim red glow. Barely enough to see several students screamed. "The Kethrani have breached the hull," Belthus said, his voice now barely above a whisper. "They are boarding the station." Una stood up slowly, her eyes adjusting to the darkness. She could feel her heart pounding in her chest. But her mind was calm and clear. This was what humans did. She realized when everything went wrong, when the predators came and the lights went out, something ancient woke up inside them. Not rage, not panic, but focus, a cold and quiet voice that whispered one simple truth: survive. She looked at her terrified classmates, at the proud Crix who suddenly seemed so small, at gentle instructor Velthos whose forearms hung limp at his sides. None of them knew what to do, but Una did. She had read about situations like this 100 times. In history books and military analyses and survivor accounts. She knew that the next few hours would determine whether they lived or died, and she knew, with a certainty that surprised even herself, that she was not going to let anyone in this room die if she could help it. "Everyone listen to me," she said, and her voice cut through the darkness like a blade. 24 pairs of alien eyes turned to look at the quiet human girl, who had barely spoken all semester. "We are going to get through this." Una continued, "But you need to trust me. Can you do that?" Nobody answered, but nobody argued either. And in the red emergency light, with explosions echoing in the distance and an alien army moving through the halls, that was enough. Una Park had never wanted to be a leader. But sometimes the universe does not care what you want. Sometimes it just needs someone who refuses to give up.